What is up, you beautiful people? Welcome back to the Built on Bitcoin podcast, where we cover all the innovation happening in the Bitcoin ecosystem. And today I have Thomas Osmonson on the podcast. You might have seen him around under his Twitter handle AllNew, which is AULNEAU underscore on Twitter. But yeah, he is the co-founder of Fungible Systems. And Fungible Systems is a crypto product studio where they build apps and support infrastructure for stuff being built on stacks. And him and his small team have built some interesting stuff so far. They did the redesign of the website for Gamma. They have some dev infrastructure stuff as far as libraries that is kind of over my head, but it sounds pretty impactful. People seem to love it. And we cover a ton of topics. We talk about why is it that developers from Web 2 are so resistant to get into Web 3? If you're a new dev, how would he make the jump and give some advice to people that are just getting started? And a bunch of other topics from the early days of Blockstack, which he was a part of. So before we jump in, though, let's have a quick word with our sponsor.
We all know Bitcoin is for the innovators, the revolutionaries, and the builders looking to build a better world for themselves and for the next generation. We also know the saying, the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The next best time is right now. The same thing applies to building on Bitcoin. If you want to come build with the most active developer community building new use cases for Bitcoin, then it's time you make the leap to learning Clarity. Clarity is the stack's smart contract programming layer, which enables us to work on DeFi, smart contracts, and so much more, all built with the safety and security that comes with Bitcoin. Start today by going to start.stacks.org. Start.stacks.org has a 5-step journey that will take you from complete Stacks novice to teaching you Clarity all the way to finding a job with a Web3 Stack startup. Don't wait another month, year, or decade waiting to get involved in the Bitcoin ecosystem. Start building on Bitcoin today. Go to start.stacks.org to start learning and building today.
Thank you to our sponsor, the Stacks Foundation, and thank you to Phosphorus for doing the ad read. Crushed it. So now let's jump straight in to this interview with Thomas Osmonson, co-founder of Fungible Systems.
Welcome to Built on Bitcoin.
Thomas, how you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing really well. How you doing?
I am fantastic. I feel like I have to stop saying this at some point, but I'm glad summer's finally here. It feels so good to have it stop raining in Portland and to be able to go outside and do some paddleboarding. I don't know if you're in that same boat.
Oh yeah, I love summer. So I've been outside biking, enjoying the water, a bunch of stuff. It's great.
Love it. Love it. Well, I'm excited to have you on. You're a pretty prolific name around Stacks. The all new name, it carries some weight on Twitter. And I'd love to just start with, what is your background? Like if someone asks, I guess we could start with when someone asks, what do you do? How do you answer that?
Yeah, sure. Well, software engineer by trade. I co-founded a little product studio with someone else in the Stacks ecosystem. His name's Jasper. And the studio is called Fungible Systems. And we just like to build cool stuff, crypto related, either like libraries or applications. We do a lot of product design, engineering, that kind of stuff.
Okay. And so you're doing developer stuff, and I'd love to explore this throughout the episode because Web3 is, when you're in Web3, everything's just like the world is changing. This is the future.
Oh yeah.
But so many developers are still on the fence, and so I'd love to hear what initially drew you to crypto. What was kind of your rabbit hole moment, and how has that been?
Sure. Yeah. Well, let's see. It started back in, I'd say 2017. I'd kind of known a little bit about Bitcoin and crypto stuff, but I had never really participated very actively. And at that time, I was like, I'd been freelance independent for about 2 or 3 years. I have a background in design. So I originally was like more of a print or traditional designer. So I do like collateral or like pamphlets, like any kind of printed media. I really like paper and stuff, so that was really fun. But I switched over and started. I've always been really interested in computers and technology, and yeah, I switched over and was freelancing for some startups. And someone who actually lives in my city, a good friend of mine, he is also a web developer, and we've wanted to build something for a while. And he had heard about this contest that this company had been put on. And he wanted to do the contest with me, but I was pretty hesitant because coming from my background in design, I had traditionally felt as though contests were kind of ways to get free work from people and not really pay them what they deserve. So I was pretty hesitant to do it. But I did some research into it, and I was like, okay, this is pretty cool. Like, if we win, we'll win some money, and if we lose, we'll have built something together. So I can't really go wrong. That company that put on the contest was Blockstack, and they used to do a lot of bounties back in the day to like have different apps be built on the platform and in the network. And so we did it, and we built this. The bounty was for a crypto portfolio app, so it was like an app that would allow you to put in when you purchase certain types of crypto for how much and all that stuff, and then you can kind of track profit and loss over time. And it was called Coins, and so we built that, and then we won the bounty, and that was really cool. And then that was kind of my first introduction into crypto, and I was like, this is pretty cool. I was really interested in like the data ownership side of like Blockstack, what they originally were doing. So that was really cool. And then Blockstack was really happy with the product that we built, and they were like, hey, do you guys want to come work for us and help build this new internet? And I was freelancing at the time for a couple of years, and I was really happy with that lifestyle. So I didn't want to, kind of go back to a full-time gig. But I did end up freelancing with Blockstack for about a year, and then I ended up joining the team in 2018. But late 2017 and early 2018, we were doing a lot of work together. And yeah, that was kind of my introduction to crypto. And ever since, I was kind of like really, really loved it, and probably won't do anything other than work in crypto for a long time.
Love it. So is that, because I've heard this term from like Zan of app mining? Are you one of the success? It's pre-app mining.
Yeah. Actually, Patrick Stanley of CityCoins and Zan those are the first people I met because they were running the bounty program. And yeah, they were great. But this is pre-app mining. So this was like something that Blockstack was trying to do to, get people interested in building. It was kind of before foundations or like grants were really much of a thing. But yeah, I was on the team when we started building out app mining and stuff. So if you have any questions on that, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay. I'm curious though, because it sounds like you're doing design work, which are you using stuff like Illustrator, Photoshop? This is pre-Figma, right?
Yeah, I remember when Sketch came out, and I was like, wow, this is so cool. But I was doing more like InDesign page layout stuff. And even younger, before I went to college and stuff, I was running like I ran this internet forum to build, like you would build these like signatures that you would put at the end of your little posts on your forum. And what we would do is we would like cut out all the different game characters from different like screenshots and stuff. And that's how I originally learned design, by doing that, by like using the pen tool to like select these characters. And then they're called renders. And then people would then use them to like create any number of things. And most of them were like these little signature things. But that's kind of how I originally got into design and computers and stuff.
Got it. So it seems like you're much more programmer heavy now.
Oh yeah. Much
so more. What was your first foray into going that route, this transition into building this product that won the Blockstack thing? Like how do you go from doing the InDesign stuff, which is like front-end web dev is my understanding, to more full stack, I'm assuming? Like what was that kind of journey like?
Yeah, well, let's see. So I went to school for design, and then I kind of got a couple of different jobs around town here at different advertising agencies. And it was fun. There's like some stuff, like I designed this like vodka bottle that was really fun. That kind of stuff was really cool. But I was always really interested in like technology and computers, from a very young age. And I remember, I was working at this advertising agency, and I was designing hospice pamphlets. So like really kind of like intense. It wasn't even like cool hospice. It was like shitty, huge company, evil medical company hospice. And so I was like, this is fucked up. Can I swear on this? I'm sorry.
It's all, yeah, we're good here. We keep it raw and real.
Okay, cool. But yeah, so I was just like, this is awful. And I like the people I worked with, it's just like traditional kind of like ad agency or trying to be ad agency stuff. Like no disrespect to anyone who loves advertisements, that's fine. But it was not for me. And so at that time I was learning a lot about like people who were doing the whole digital nomad stuff. And I was like, oh, that sounds cool. I like computers and code. I know how to code. Like I was like very good at like HTML and CSS. That was like my thing. And so I was like, maybe I could switch from design and start doing kind of website stuff. And I kind of quit my job. And then for 6 months, I had no work. And I was like, this is not good. But then I was very lucky and I got an invitation to this kind of like freelancers job board that was started by this guy who started Unsplash, the like stock photography website. He also started this thing called Crew. And I was invited to join, and I was like, okay, this is cool. And I got a few different contracts through that. And that really started my journey on like, I was building like marketing sites. And this was very early when like Next.js, which is like a server-side rendered React framework, it was still an alpha at that point. And I was really excited about that. And so I started using that and learning JavaScript and all these different things at that point. And that was kind of the beginning of my journey to now where I'm, doing a lot of like more full stacky stuff for sure.
Do you think that app mining would work today if we brought it back to Stacks?
Maybe. I feel like app mining was very early, or like maybe is ahead of its time potentially. Because now it definitely feels way more realistic, at least in the context of Stacks. I feel like when app mining was started, and for people who maybe don't know what app mining is, I can give a little bit of background. There was a program in which it's kind of similar to the grants program today that the Stacks Foundation puts on, but it was more like we hired some game theorists to kind of create this algorithm or some sort of mechanism such that people would have a really hard time gaming it. But it was a ranking system for apps being built on Stacks. And if you were ranked high enough, you would get a Bitcoin payout every month. And so there was this like system for kind of judging and classifying it off of this different criteria. And ultimately the program was shut down. I feel like we were just it was before Stacks 2.0. So it was like, a very different world that we were kind of living in. But it'd be really interesting to bring it back today or some variation of it. Because I'm a big fan of like, I feel like competition is good for people who are building apps, and it really forces you to think about what do the users want, as long as the criteria is good, like if you're being judged on things that are like impactful.
Like that. Okay. Trying to think. We're probably gonna dance around in this interview. Maybe let's jump first so you went from Blockstack or Hero to going back to starting your own gig with Fungible Systems. And you kind of alluded to it, but what is Fungible Systems? What's some of the projects you guys have done so far?
Yeah. So Fungible Systems is a crypto product studio. So we're trying to build, I don't know, Jasper and I, we both really love like well-crafted products, in any context, right? Like we spend a lot of time even like daydreaming about like what are we going to do after, and maybe at some point we'll do like we always joke around about like maybe building like really nice handmade furniture, like that kind of thing. So we love craft, right? And so we like to apply that to whatever it is we're building. And we both also really love crypto and like everything that it has in Web3, everything to offer. And so the things that we've worked on, when we worked at Blockstack and Hero together, we kind of worked on everything that had a front end. So we worked on, the wallets, we worked on Explorer, I worked on the SDKs, stuff like that. And when we left, we wanted to venture out and be like, okay, there are all these apps and startups and products being built, and it'd be really fun to be able to kind of help them out in some way. We have a lot of context, especially around kind of stacks, but more generally around crypto and product design and stuff like that. And so we wanted to like start interacting with companies that maybe we could like have a really like pull the lever on really strongly. And so one of the first things that we worked on was Gamma or Stacks NFT. We worked with Jamil and the team, and we kind of came in and sort of rebuilt everything from the ground up for them in kind of the way of like branding, naming, product design, product engineering, back-end infrastructure. Yeah, just stuff like that. And that was a really fun project, and I really love the team. And then we've also built a few other things. We've done a lot of open source tooling is kind of what we spend our time on too, at least for me. So I maintain MicroStacks, which is a alternative to Stacks.js, which is the leading kind of JavaScript and TypeScript SDK libraries for building stacks-related apps. But MicroStacks has a focus on being very modern and very small. So right now with Stacks.js, if you use it, it has a lot of kind of legacy dependencies, what you call them, where it's like they're kind of either really big or they're more outdated or less maintained. And as a result, when you use those things, like maybe in more modern bundlers or tools, then you kind of have to work around all that stuff. And it's not always compatible, and there's a lot of bugs and stuff that can happen with that. And so I started building MicroStacks because I build all these things in these really modern tools. And so I did it for myself originally because I was like, I want to build these apps in a modern way, and I can't do it now. So I'm going to kind of make it possible. But now there's a bunch of stuff around MicroStacks that I'm really excited about. But as far as products like that we've worked on in the studio, we're working on something now that I can't really talk about, but it's really exciting. I've also done a lot of work just around thinking more deeply around how like data indexing stuff can work on stacks. Yeah,
Okay.
lots of stuff. Mm-hmm.
Interesting. I'm definitely not techie in that regard, but there's a lot of stuff that goes on in the background, and you said it right there with like indexing, which is like that's the unsexy stuff.
Oh yeah.
Once the infrastructure is there, it allows all the developers who are building after you to go that much faster. I remember reading
Exactly.
Twilio, or the founder of Twilio's book, Jeff Lawson's book, Ask Your Developer.
Mm-hmm.
He talks a lot about that, where they're really big on like not enough companies build intra tools to allow you to go faster within the company.
Oh
and
yeah.
they don't spend enough money at all on that because they feel like it's a sunk cost you're never going to recoup.
Totally. I'm a big fan of that mentality, not of the mentality of, I want to build tools that make other people not have to think about things they don't need to think about, or make them think about things in ways that make them a better engineer, a better developer. And so with MicroStacks specifically, it's like, I built literally dozens upon dozens of Stacks apps over the years. And I'm like, there's certain things you just need to do every time you build a Stacks related app or any kind of crypto app, really. You have to like deal with authentication, you have to deal with, signing transactions, all these different things. And the way that the tooling was set up before is you have to repeat yourself so many times, and engineers have to have like so much contextual knowledge to know how to do certain things because they're not wrapped up in a way that makes it really easy to use. And so that's kind of, for me, a big driving factor of why I work on MicroStacks is like, you should be able to intuitively understand how to use these tools. And also kind of similar to with like when we build products that are more user facing, we really care about user experience. There's another kind of experience that I care a lot about called developer experience. It's like, there are tools that I use as a developer and I'm like, holy shit, this is so fun to use. And it just works, right? And so that's kind of the tooling I want to build too.
I like that. Is there big, how do I word this? Like technical developer experience hurdles that are still pretty large in your mind that should be handled for people that are coming in the ecosystem?
For Stacks specifically?
Yeah.
I think so. I mean, there's a few things that I'm still thinking a lot about right now, or I'm thinking more about the future around tooling. And two areas that I'm really excited about is one, so like post conditions are a unique thing in stacks, and post conditions are basically like guardrails that you as a developer, you as a user can put on anything you do in the context of stacks. So let's say you mint an NFT, there'll be a post condition saying that you're only going to transfer the exact amount of stacks or whatever the currency is that you're using to purchase or mint the NFT, and then you're going to receive that NFT, right? And if the contract does something other than what those post conditions outline, it'll fail and protect you. And so that's really amazing, and that like can solve a lot of different things. And but when you're working with them as an engineer, they're kind of confusing, and you need to work with a lot of different types of data. You need to like convert strings and stuff into clarity values. You need to construct this like 3 or 4 step thing to do it. And it's also confusing about like, okay, you have these what are called post condition codes, where it's like, okay, I have an asset and I have to select one of these codes that relates to the behavior I want it to do. And so for me, I'm like, how can we build tooling that's way more human readable? Meaning like, okay, this transaction is only going to transfer exactly this much or it's going to fail. Like, how can we build tooling that in the way you use it, it's implicitly conveying what you want it to do, rather than having to, again, know all these different things and how to tie them together just perfectly. So that's one area that I'm focusing on, where it's like, okay, we can make this a lot easier, and it's not a lot of work to do. I just don't think anyone's had the time to do it. And then another area that I'm super excited about is with Stacks specifically, because Clarity is non-Turing, and it's kind of like, you know what's going to happen. You can read it. You can read Clarity code. It's there. There are other things you can do. You can do with it, like analyze it in such a way that would allow you to basically like remove 5 or 6 steps that you normally would have to do when building an app. So let's say you're building an NFT minting website, right? And so you've got a contract. Maybe it's based off of something like Megapons or another really, a kind of more standard based contract that's got like, mint and all the like listing functions, stuff like that. Because we know what the contract does and we can read it and we can analyze it, we can take the code from the contract, run it through a program, and then we can output either React code or Svelte code or Vue code or whatever framework you want to use. We can output code that makes it really easy for you to interact with that contract. So what I mean by that is, so we take the contract, we output it to something like React. That'll give us a function we can use that is one for one exactly what the contract expects. So you no longer need to do things like, okay, I need to find the contract address, I need to put it in here, I need to select manually what the function name is, I need to construct the arguments that go into this function. We can do all that for you. And all you need to do is pass in kind of the normal JavaScript based values, and then it'll do everything for you. And even post conditions we can kind of create for you on the fly. And so for me, that kind of stuff is really exciting. And I feel like would be very unique in the context of crypto, because I don't think you can do that in most ecosystems,
What, for the thing you were just talking about, what were you calling that? What would you describe that as like a term?
Well, code generation, as a very high level, because Clarity, you can statically analyze it. You could build a lot of tooling around it. So like, I have a proof of concept CLI tool that I can hit, like, I'll put a contract address in a file, in like a configuration file. I'll hit generate. It'll like pull it all down, parse it and give me all the different types for it. It'll give me all the functions, all that stuff. And it just like removes 5 or 6 steps that you have to do every time you want to interact with any contract, And then also you could do autocomplete kind of stuff too. So like, that's the kind of developer experience I really enjoy working on, where it's like, I rely heavily on autocomplete and all this IntelliSense kind of stuff in my IDE. And so what are ways in which we can build tooling that kind of leverage all of the amazing kind of stuff that we use on a day-to-day basis?
Got it. It sounds really cool. Like, it sounds kind of like it sounds kind of like a drag and drop builder that like reverses engineers the contract and takes out like because with drag and drop builders, you work in blocks typically. So like this is my text
Oh
block
yeah,
and this is my
exactly.
inline. And so you're taking
Hmm.
that from at the contract level, and then you could say, okay, I want this list function.
Hmm.
Um, would that dovetail into some of the stuff that maybe no code clarity is doing?
A little bit, yeah. I've seen the stuff that they've been working on at a very high level. I do think, Jasper and I have actually talked about this. We're really interested in maybe building a new Explorer for Stacks, but one that's like very unique. When it's not like just like a standard, like, okay, we're gonna go look at blocks and stuff. It's like, how do we make all this information on Stacks or on an ecosystem? Like, how do we make it personable and human readable? And so one of the things we talked about was like, okay, because we have an ability to kind of like understand and analyze this code, why can't we just make a UI that allows you to add a bunch of contracts, pull out things that you want to use, like maybe it's like an NFT minting thing, and you could just drag and drop different components that will just allow you to kind of do 90% of what you would do as an engineer without coding anything. So it's definitely, there's a lot you can do with it. Because once you've kind of just built out the foundational um, elements for interacting with the types and clarity and the functions, then you could basically do it for anything. You're just repeating it over and over again.
Okay, man. I hope you guys build that. That sounds fucking badass.
Yeah.
Um, I'll be a one upvote for that. But
Okay, cool. I'll send you the link when we apply for a grant.
very very cool. So we've talked a little bit about like people who are already devs and some more like the technical side of stuff. Um, and for me, like short backstory, but the reason I got into Stacks is to become a developer. I was like,
Oh,
I
cool.
want. I worked at a grocery store for 15 years. I want to
Hmm.
get a real career. Developer sounds pretty badass, but let me not go compete with like Facebook front end, all
Sure.
these.
Yeah.
Let me go straight to the blue ocean that is crypto, and let me do that
Hmm.
again and go into Stacks because I'm not going to compete with Slimdy devs.
Hmm.
Uh, did that for 3 months, started a podcast instead. Here we are.
Hmm.
But I was really shocked at how little clarity stuff there was in May of last year when I got here.
Hmm.
It's getting better now, but in a broad sense, do you have any advice for new devs that have no experience and they're jumping into Web3 specifically, or we can even go find finer comb and clarity, but they're going into the crypto
Sure.
space and starting from zero.
Yeah, let's see. Advice for new folks. Let me think about that. I think, well, I'll be honest, I actually don't know Clarity. Like I've not written a Clarity contract
Mm,
before. I interact with Clarity a lot though in the context of like JavaScript and TypeScript and other things. And so I know it in that way. Um, I don't know. I think it doesn't even need to be Web3 specific, but for me at least, there's this I would recommend people probably learn something like React, JavaScript, TypeScript. Um, but if you're interested in Web3, I feel like if you start learning not even one ecosystem like Stacks or Ethereum, but the patterns that are common between them all, because they are all very like at a certain level, it's hard to distinguish them because they all kind of work from these same kind of cryptographic primitives. I would recommend, dig into like what are the foundational things that allows for crypto and NFTs and all these like higher level things to exist, right? That's like for me when I started working on microstacks. Originally, a part of it was like I just want to understand at a very low level, like how does this actually work? Because then, as I work on more higher, like day to day level things, I have all that context and knowledge that I can then be like, oh, okay, I can apply it here and here. Um, that's kind of a roundabout answer, but I would probably just say, find things you're really interested in and work on them. That's what I do, and that's why I'm here today is because I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. And I could work on this forever because I'm curious about it. And I think that's what a lot of engineers kind of thrive on.
yeah, I've asked almost every dev I've talked to that question, and almost
Hmm.
everyone has given that answer where it's
Right.
like, I could give you the blueprint, but you're going to get lost at some point. And if
Oh
you
yeah.
don't love it and you're curious about it at like an intrinsic level, then
Hmm.
that roadblock is going to be like fucking massive and you're going to hate coding.
Exactly.
So,
Right. Yeah. And there are
okay.
sometimes. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I'm just curious, because I think the emotion I felt when I was just getting started is like it's hard to even know where to focus on. Like I don't even
Oh,
know if I
definitely.
like front end or back end more. And so
Hmm.
the the fear I was having is like, first of all, it's if I just learn clarity, is that enough to get a job? That was my first
Hmm.
concern. Like if I'm a smart
Hmm.
contract engineer, is that enough? Or do I have to pick clarity slash and then you pick your direction, front or back end, and then you can go
Hmm.
down in the nuances of JavaScript, TypeScript, React, whatever, or learning
Hmm.
back end. Um, is that directionally right?
Yeah, I would say, at least in the context of stacks, we need more Clarity engineers for sure. But Clarity is actually based off of a different language called Lisp. And I'd recommend, I don't know, I mean, I haven't learned Clarity, so take this with a grain of salt, but um, it'd probably be good to learn maybe why is it based off of Lisp, and then learn some Lisp, and then learn Clarity in addition to it. And that way, I think you'll get a more well-rounded kind of experience. But I also think having some ability to interact with Clarity, so like you could write Clarity and you could build contracts and they're deployed in the blockchain, and then that could be all you do. But that's only a portion of, you know, the story, because you could build a contract, but if no one's interacting with that contract, then it's not really very useful, right? And so typically the way that people interact with contracts is through JavaScript, TypeScript. I know some people are building maybe like a Go library, or, you know, the blockchain itself is written in Rust. It would be really beneficial, I think, to have an understanding of both sides. That way, maybe, because there's a lot of things that I've found, you know, as I've been building apps and stuff, you know, like one example that's really useful that I don't think if you're just building smart contracts you would have come upon is where, um, like for Arcadico and Alex, they're some of the first contracts that really started doing this pattern where after a certain function call, they print out the result of that function call, meaning like maybe you create a vault in Arcadico. It would print out, meaning it would just log kind of the state change that that function did internally in the contract, but it would log it out so that other people or other applications can make use of it. And so for me, as I've built like many different indexers, that makes my life way easier. Or like there was a, when I worked at Hero, we did a hackathon where we built out this app called Haystack, which was basically you sign a transaction and you include a message on it, and it's like a Twitter kind of alternative where you sign a message and then it's on the blockchain, and then we use that, the same function of printing out the information, to reconstruct it on the app. So that's all to say, like, if you can build Clarity contracts, but then work very closely with people who are actually building apps or building tools that use those contracts, I think you'll have a better time probably.
Okay, that makes sense.
Mhm.
Um, okay, you might have answered this, but I heard it in some doses. But what are you working on right now? What are your main projects that you're kind of? Because I see you like I've been picking up data points where you're doing microstacks. You know,
Mhm.
V1 is it 0.01? I don't want to get my versions
It's
wrong.
V1, first version.
Okay, and then I see you did like a quick revision of multi-safes thing from Stacks.js
Oh yeah.
to
Yeah.
microstacks. So you're kind of like I feel like most developers in Stacks are like they're in 8 different places at any random
Hmm.
time. What do you kind of have your tentacles right now that you could talk about?
Yeah, let's see. So, well, so we've got one. The way that our agency or the studio kind of works is we try to split our time between client work and our own work. And so that's what we're doing now. We're like, part of my time I'm spending a lot on MicroStack specifically. You know, I had COVID like a month or two ago, and so I was like, I'm really sick. I should do something. I'm laying here, and so that's when I started really pushing towards version 1 of MicroStacks. And a big part of why we're at version 1 now is, it was audited and it's safe for everyone to use now. And so I wanted to do a version bump for that. I've been building out, framework integrations for that. So people who are building Svelte apps or Vue apps or things like that, they now have kind of like first class support for those libraries. And so it'll be a lot easier for them to build out apps. Outside of that, I'm more interested in like production apps that are using Stack.js to see how hard it would be to switch over to microstacks. And so multi-safe was one example. I was like, how hard would it be to switch this out? And is there a benefit to doing this, right? Like if there's no benefit, I don't want people to do it. But thankfully there was. It was basically like, when it comes to like web apps and stuff, there's this term called bundle size, which is kind of how much code is being shipped along with this app to people that they have to download and parse and all these different things. And the bigger it is, the slower it can be to parse or to use on mobile phones, stuff like that. And when I did the transition with multi-safe from Stack.js to microstacks, it went down like almost 600 kilobytes. And that's a lot. That's like big because it's already compressed. So they've got a real benefit to potentially switching. It sounds like they're going to, so that's exciting. But outside of that, we are working on, can't talk too much about it, but it's just like a native app. So like a React Native app, which I'm really excited about. And we'll probably be able to talk more about in the future. But kind of with that, I've been exploring like how could we use microstacks on phones, and how can we make a really cool experience on the phone. Another thing we really want to start soon is that Explorer that I talked about a little bit before. We're kind of calling it, the code name is the Stacks Chronicle. And so it's going to be an Explorer that is more like we want to build an app registry along with it. So it'll be a place you can go. Like we don't like using the word Explorer because it's way more than that, but it'll be a place you can go to see what's going on in Stacks and to do it in a way that's very like human readable. And what I mean by that is like you go to the Explorer now, any Explorer really on any network, and it's like transaction IDs, block heights, a bunch of stuff that is like very technical and very hard to parse. When in reality, much of that stuff is like you sent someone Bitcoin, you minted an NFT, you swapped this token for that token, right? It has meaning, but it's very contextual meaning, right? So you need to go to the app that it originated from, stuff like that. But I think with Stacks, we can make an Explorer that you go there and you'll be like, oh, I see Jamil recently minted this NFT, or like he's used these other apps, or like these 10 apps are the most popular apps that have been used in the last 100 blocks. Or like here's a new trending app that's, just been launched or hasn't even been announced yet, but we could see it through on-chain activity. And then in addition to that, how do we like bring in more, because we have this naming system, right, on Stacks, BNS. How do we make that like a first-class kind of participant in everything we do? And so we want to integrate that and stuff like that. But that's really exciting. So that's something else we're going to start probably in September. Jasper's about to have a baby, so he's going to be on leave for a little bit. But when he's back, we're going to probably get heads down on that. And then, we might, there's a couple companies in the ecosystem we're really excited about working with, and we're in talks with working with them too. So yeah, TPD on that.
Cool. Man, I Stacks Chronicle sounds freaking cool. It sounds like a newspaper, first of all. So it's just kind of like it's the daily news, but it's
exactly
it's actual real-time daily news, moment to moment, in a what I'm assuming is a like visually appealing way that you like a regular pleb like myself can go and decipher what's going on in the blockchain.
Exactly. And also just like little things we've started doing some design on it and exploring like little UI elements that would make it really interesting. Like one example would be like, let's say maybe you're looking at a transaction, or you like looking at a list of like activity that's happened recently. You can hover over a BNS name and it'll give you like a snapshot of what they've been up to recently. So it'll be like a little tooltip that shows like, here are the apps they're using, here's how many NFTs they have, here's how much stacks they have, or, XBTC or whatever it might be. So it's just little things like that. It's like, how can we bring all of these different bits of real information, like, asset images and like very high fidelity naming, like to tokens and stuff. How do we bring all that together and present it in a cohesive kind of picture? And that's kind of the goal behind it.
That's very cool. Okay, I got a couple more questions left.
Yeah.
This has been fantastic. And I'm going back to getting developers into the ecosystem. That's like everyone wants it. I guess I could ask it two ways. Maybe what do you think is the biggest blocker for people to move into Web3? Say they're already developers and are they comfortable? Like, what is, in your experience, what do you think is the biggest blocker that prevents them from wanting to jump?
Yeah. We've tried to hire a couple people straight out of like a Web2 job for the studio, and it's hard because people, I think rightfully so, are very skeptical of Web3. Like even friends of mine, they kind of think everything in Web3 and crypto is a scam, or they just don't have enough information, or they don't have enough of both sides to really be able to understand. Like, yes, there are a lot of scams. Like I'm not going to say that there aren't, but people don't see the positives or like the ways in which that it could change the future. It's going to change. Like there's no question whatsoever about that. It's not going away. And so I think that's a huge blocker. Like how can you convey all of that information to someone when they have already so much information on why it's a scam or why, maybe it's risky too. That's a big part of it too. Maybe it's not as secure as a Web2 job that people have already. But again, I think that can change because like the Stacks Foundation as an example has done such an amazing job of like giving grants out and getting people active in the development community. And it's not even unique to Stacks. Like so many ecosystems have a really great foundation that are kind of pushing forward that kind of thing too. I don't know. I think it's hard to disconnect like Web3 with like pyramid schemes and scams, right? Like if we could do that, if we could show, like that's kind of why I was so into Blockstack originally, because it was like, hey, we care about getting you ownership over your data. And so we don't want people to like data mine you, or we just want you to have an ability to provide consent if you want people to do this. You could choose to sell your data if you want to, right? And so if we can go more towards that, because there's a lot of Web3 that still is more about like decentralization and data ownership and like privacy and all that stuff. I think that would be a good way to get people more interested in probably.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I think the culture over time will change. And I could see that though. Like it's kind of like when you have a friend who's in like a multi-level marketing thing. You're like, I'm sure these paper towels and toothpaste are good, but
right,
I just can't fully trust that you like it for the fact that you like it, because you're also going to get 28 cents on the tube I buy. So it's if it wasn't there, it'd be easier. Which number go up and heavy bag holders.
Exactly.
Like it's just there. You can't avoid it.
No.
Okay, last question I got is I like to end on a high note. So
Sure.
Usually I'm talking to some kind of founder that's building some kind of app, but you do many things. So I'm curious, where do you see yourself in like this ideal future? And like I'll place it. Stacks is number 3, so it's like Bitcoin, ETH, Stacks. So we got an abundance of attention. There's liquidity, all these things. And you've been executing for 3 years, just crushing it, doing whatever you please. What does 3 years look like for Thomas?
Wow. Okay. I don't know, man. Let's see. I feel like it'd be cool if the studio was a little bit bigger. We're still interested in. It'd be cool if we really care about hiring people who really love and are really good at what they do. Right. That's kind of like our only criteria, and are nice people. And so it'd be cool if the studio was a bit bigger and we had an ability to take on a little bit more work, but at the same kind of like high level that we want to. Maybe we've built like a native Stacks wallet. That's something I'd love to work on at some point. I think there's for a really long time, I've thought there's a lot of really interesting things that can be done with that. 3 years from now, there'd also be maybe like more interoperability between stacks and Bitcoin and Ethereum and all that stuff. So it's like, on Ethereum, you have Wallet Connect where people can like use their native app or they can use the web app at the same time, and it's all connected and it's very seamless. I hope that we have something very similar to that. Or maybe there's more standards around identity. Because for me, it'd be cool if there was more of like, so I have an Ethereum wallet, I have a Bitcoin wallet, I have all a Stacks wallet, all these different things, and I have an ENS name and a BNS name, and I want all of that to come together, and I can have my online identity be my online identity. That's really exciting and cool to me. And again, part of the original reason why I joined Blockstack is like, oh, it's kind of like one name kind of thing has been what they wanted to do for a long time. So that'd be cool. 3 years from now, let's see. MicroStacks is like the go-to tooling for building Stacks apps. That'd be dope. Maybe we win an award for design. That's something we're interested in. Yeah, I don't know. It'd be cool, just like more people building interesting stuff. Because then it's like, wow, there's a bunch of cool stuff here. That's all I really care about. Or like impactful stuff that helps people.
Love it. Okay, that's great. Man, this has been a fantastic conversation. Anything I didn't cover? Any closing thoughts that you'd like to close out on?
What about you? What about you in 3 years?
Ooh, podcast is huge. I'm still probably doing a balance of this and something in Stacks. So I don't want to do full podcast. So I'm currently at Stacks Ventures. Maybe stay there and see how far the kind of like VC landscape goes. I don't know. The more I talk to developers, the more I like the idea of there's something really intoxicating about the leverage that code gets you. Because like, I've had an eBay business where, I was going to estate sales, flipping on eBay, whatever.
Oh, fun.
And it was cool. Like you see all these different houses and different people and locations. But then I got really bogged down by like my inventory is like attached to me, it's like an anchor that I can't take it a bunch of places. And so there's something about like the digital nomad that develops like world-changing tech that can touch millions of people. There's something about that is really, really interesting. So maybe, big maybe, I might learn coding in some fashion and build something interesting if the right idea, spurred me. So I don't know. I think keep doing this, keep talking to interesting people, and try to spread the good word of Stacks is probably what I'll still be doing. But that's actually a good question. I haven't thought about that.
Yeah, I mean, I recommend learning how to code. I feel like, I don't know, one of my favorite things about it just generally is like I can think about doing something. I'm like, oh, it'd be cool if that existed. Then I could just build it. But then I could just, and then I could be like, oh, other people want to use this too. That's so cool.
Yeah. It's also cool thinking like a computer does, like that systems mentality where you can see your org chart. Like it just makes your thinking clear. It's like the more you write, like you write how you think. And so the more you write, like the more your speech gets better. The 2 months I spent learning coding, it just helps you with how to process things, break them down, see where you're almost like where your logic is wrong. Like you could see where you're like, oh, it went to there. That was actually incorrect. And I keep bumping into that. So I don't know. I think coding seems like a meta life skill.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I agree.
Cool. Well, man, Thomas, thank you for taking the time. This has been fantastic. I think people are going to get a lot from this. If people want to connect with you, what's a good source?
I'm very active on Twitter, both fortunately and unfortunately. So feel free to DM me there if you want. I'm active in most of the Stacks related Discords as well. My handle is Aulneau, AULNEAU. On Twitter, there's a underscore at the end because someone else has my name. But feel free to DM me, reach out. I'm super, I love, if anyone's curious on how to build an app, I love helping people. And so, feel free to ask me any questions you might have.
Perfect. All right. Well, that's it for this episode. Thank you for coming on the podcast, Thomas. Appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you.
Welcome to Built on Bitcoin.
I know that things don't always go your way, but I'll be right here waiting. I've been waiting now. I've been trying to figure out a way to make it out, cause I don't think about